Shalom, shalom, everybody. This is Prophets of Awakening. This is our Wednesday night class, and it's 26th of August, 2020, and we're gonna start out with a moment of silence in regards to all the things that the Lord of hosts is doing in the earth, engineering our deliverance from our lands of our oppressors, and then we're gonna do a prayer. Oh Lord, we come before thee this day with great praise and honor. We thank thee for the mercy and steadfastness, for thy mercy and steadfastness. Oh Lord, we see and understand thy words concerning our great deliverance from our oppressors. Oh Lord, we will wait upon thee. Oh Lord, we will tarry and have patience because you have given us understanding and knowledge to consider. Oh Lord, David and all his house long ago understood this very fact. We, O Lord, was given unto you for an inheritance. Who can deliver us from your hand? Turn not thy face from us. Turn not thy knowledge from us, O Lord. Consider us, O Lord. Embrace us, for we respect and honor you with all our minds, body, and soul that you have given unto us. Peace be unto you. Okay. So with that being said, got any current events? Anything somebody want to bring up or make known up to the class?
Yeah,
Okay.
Propaganda Central has keeps on fueling the fire, and that guy that got shot by police, they got a second video that just came out showing
Somebody,
that
Drake,
yeah,
Blake,
Blake, I think,
Blake. Yeah.
yeah, showing that him and the police was fighting on the ground or whatever, and it sounded like somebody said he got a knife or something like that.
Right.
And so we don't know what was said before, why he got in the vehicle. He could have said, I got something for y'all niggas, or, anything. We don't know what was
Right.
said. But the bottom line is they chose to release the one video, to get everybody all pissed off, and then they released the second video to justify it.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah. Well,
same
that's
there.
all that is. All that's doing is just verifying what we're dealing with right now. With what the guy was telling us how they operate in this video we've been watching. How they know just what to do. How to fuel when they have an objective, they know just what to do to fuel it.
Right.
Right. So we looking at it and we looking at it firsthand. Right.
And same narrative over and over.
Right, exactly, and they like I said, they pros at it, and they ain't just started. It ain't just started, 100 years ago. I was talking about how it go all the way back, even beyond what happened to Julius Caesar in the Senate. He go before that. They've been doing this, and that's what the Most High is meaning by when he in 2 Samuel when he talk about the children of wickedness. People don't comprehend what that's talking about. And so with that being said, I had a couple of we already dealt with part one of the Illuminati, but I wanted some things in there that I wanted to plug in there before I start this last hour or so, and that is let me turn my camera on. We I had mentioned to you guys a while back about this book right here, The Biggest Secret. I don't know if you got it or not, but it's the biggest secret, right? And so what's going on with it? The guy was mentioning about the Rothschilds. I'm gonna read a little part out of here about the Rothschilds. You can go get this book. This on page 215. It says so like I said, we going in the rabbit hole now because I feel like the people that's on this line, we kind of got a foundation, the fundamentals. So we going in. So it says the Rothschilds. It says one of the bloodlines which came from the reptile Aryans within the Khazarian Empire. So these Khazars are like I was telling you before, it's tied to the Ashkenazis, which is tied to Japhet's lineage. Genesis chapter 10. It says, and the empire in the Caucasus Mountains is the Rothschilds. Their leading members are reptile, full-blood reptilians, knowingly occupying a human physical form. Insiders say that the Rothschilds secretly claim that their bloodline goes back to Nimrod in Babylon, and I have no doubt that they will connect to the Ramesses Piso Bush bloodline. So I'm gonna stop right there, but you can go back and read that. So you say, well, what's they talking about? What's all this reptile and all this stuff? Well, what showed up in the garden? It's a serpent. A reptile showed up in the garden, right? So let's look at that. We're gonna look right quick at it, and people on the line already know this, but we're gonna go in on it right quick. So it says. Verse chapter 3 of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 1. Now the serpent was more subtle than any other beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, have God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, You may eat of the fruit trees of the garden. So anyway, there go the serpent, the reptile they talking about, that David Icke talking about. But he's going back, like I said before, they'll take you back. They'll give you some of the information, but not all of it. But their lineage go back to the garden. Not to Nimrod, back to the garden. And what you come to find out when you properly divide and understand what happened in the beginning, the serpent cohabitated with Eve and got Cain. That's what that is. So when you say what you're talking about, you go to Genesis chapter 4, verse 16. And it says, and Cain's descendants is separated from Adam's descendants over here in 4 and 16. Cain's descendants separated from Adam's descendants in chapter 5, cause Cain ain't none of Adam's son. The serpent cohabitated with Eve and got Cain. These are children of wickedness that David's talking about in 2 Samuel chapter 7. Let me give it to you right quick. 2 Samuel chapter 7. The Lord of hosts sent Nathan to talk to David, tell him David wanted to build a house. And the Most High said he couldn't build it because he had been shedding blood. And so he's telling him in verse 2 Samuel 7 and 10, Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel. I will plant them that they may dwell in the place of their own and move no more. Neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them anymore at the foretime. These children of wickedness is Cain's descendants, which is came through the flood. He told Noah to go get 2 of every kind of all flesh, which is genitalia, and they put them on the ark. So Japhet came from Cain's descendant, and they came, and so like I said before, when you understand all that, that's a conversation for another day. But this is what they talk about when they talk about reptiles. They tie to the reptiles, and when you understand that these people, they was dealing with Egypt. When you understand what Egypt is, the Pharaoh got a serpent on his head. One of the symbols on top of his head is a serpent. So that's what he's talking about. The serpent, Cain is a product of serpent and Eve, the reptile that came in the garden that's laid with Eve. Got Cain's descendant. Made wicked as hell. So anyway, like I was telling you before, that was in chapter 10 of this book right here, The Biggest Secret. You want to get it, and so check it out. But not only that, this guy David Icke, he wrote this book too also. So it goes into further detail in this book. Let me hold it up for you. Okay, yeah, there it is. See that David Icke right here, David Icke. So, like I said, you get this book right here. It's just like you don't have this, just like part of the Bible. You need this. You know what I'm saying? So, With that being said, we're gonna move forward. We're gonna plug in these other two books right quick. These are the books I wrote. You know, explaining who the God of Israel is. You know, you can get that on Amazon. It's the other one. Right here. King David, who the Messiah of Israel is. You go all the way in detail, break it down. Okay. Okay. Now what we're gonna do is I was talking the other day. I mentioned that Christ, where Christ come from, which is you know, you got Christianity, where it's, the word Christ is in Christianity. That's where Christianity come from. So who is this Christ? And I was telling you how that the Egyptians had a little code, not silences, but the Egyptians had the Trinity, which is like I said, Trinity is wicked as hell. So it's come from the mind of heathens, pagans, paganistic and Hellenistic. So you had uh, uh, Horus, Isis, and Osar. Those are that's father and the father and mother was Horus and Isis, and the son, which was immaculately conceived, was Horus. Okay, well when the Greeks came and they took that Trinity and they that's where we get the Black Madonna from. And the people that I was trying to give you the name of who they was, I couldn't think of, was Gnostics. It's a Gnostic religion. And so that's the Gnostic religion. What I'm doing is filling in gaps. So when you go to the Greeks came on the scene, and I told you how Alexander was killed and his conquest stopped in India, and the religion that was going on was Buddhism, and that's what they was dealing with. So from that Buddhism came, they created this Christ, which is tied to the Black Madonna, the Black mother and father and the son. That's what it was. Gnostics was dealing with that, and then and like I said, they don't want the Augustus. He was adopted, but Caesarion, which was Julius Caesar's real son that he had by Cleopatra, was the rightful heir by blood. So I told you when he left and went to the monastery and all that, came back. Now he's according to Buddhism, he was Maitreya. And so they didn't want then people was worshiping him all over the place. He's already born the son of God. So Augustus didn't want to deal with none of that. That's why the Roman Empire shunned it at first. But then by the time you get to Constantine, the Roman Empire Rome been sacked by these three classes of giants. They sacked Rome, and Rome was divided into 4 parts for a long time. Constantine brought it back together, but he needed a religion. Now he goes back and embraced that religion that they had concocted, which is from tied to Caesarion and tied to the Black Madonna, the Black child, and the Black mom and dad that the Pope goes in behind the secret doors and bow down to. So that's what. And so, but in order to get that religion, he had to steal it from the Gnostics. And so that's the Gnostics are the people with so-called secret knowledge that Paul talking about, and they talking about, yeah, I got a secret here and a secret there. It's that. And so they had to get rid of them. So those are the people that's hiding in the catacombs that they telling you Christians. Those are the people that was fed to the lions in the arenas and stuff all over the Roman Empire. They had to get rid of those people in order to confiscate their religion, which was Gnosticism. And like I said, all this stuff been hidden and taken out of the context where you can't understand how, because like I said, Christianity ain't nothing but it started as a little baby and it grew up. It ain't you know, it's not no kid was born in the bosom of the father and all that. It's the human intellect that created it, and human intellect that brought it up to where it's at today. And it had nothing to do with the Most High. Anyway, so with that being said, I was gonna I'm gonna start this other part of the video. Well, I had one more thing. I had talked about well, I keep showing you how that these people are orchestrating us leaving here, and I'm gonna give you an example of how they go about doing it in the part one. I'm gonna play this. I think I skipped it, so I'm gonna play it right now, and you're gonna see how that this guy Jacob Schiff needs the Rothschilds, who they own almost 95% of the world wealth, which are Edomites. They wanted to steal the money system from the Americans, and they had tried on several occasions, and they couldn't do it. It didn't happen. So now they on another run to bring in the Federal Reserve back, because the Federal Reserve is not American, it's foreign, and then that's where all our money being ciphered is through the Federal Reserve. So they wanted to bring that and put that in existence, but they had to go. It's a plan they had to go about to do it. So we're gonna watch this plan right here, and while we listening to it, keep in mind that they want us in Africa. And we saw how we just talked about how these people they've been doing these same old routines over and over again to get things accomplished. But they got the American people dumbed down, and they void to understand how they operate. But we're gonna check it out right here. He wants to steal the federal. He want to implement the Federal Reserve into the American society and the 16th Amendment to get the taxes. So, but it ain't in existence at the time. But we're gonna watch the process how they gonna make it happen to where we at today.
Or destroyed temporarily all chances of the House of Rothschild to get a clutch on our money system, such as they had acquired in Britain and other nations in Europe. I say temporarily because the Rothschilds and the masterminds of the conspiracy never quit. So they had to start from scratch, but they lost no time in getting started. Shortly after the Civil War, a young immigrant who called himself Jacob H. Schiff arrived in New York. Jacob was a young man with a mission for the House of Rothschild. Jacob was the son of a rabbi, born in one of Rothschild's houses in Frankfurt, Germany. I won't go deeply into his background. The important point is that Rothschild recognized in him not only a potential money wizard, but more important, he also saw the latent Machiavellian qualities in Jacob that could, as it did, make him an invaluable functionary in the great one-world conspiracy. After a comparatively brief training period in the Rothschilds' London bank, Jacob left for America with instructions to buy into a banking house, which was to be the springboard to acquire control of the money system of the United States. Actually, Jacob came here to carry out 4 specific assignments. Number 1, and most important, was to acquire control of America's money system. Number 2, find desirable men who, for a price, would be willing to serve as stooges for the great conspiracy and promote them into high places in our federal government, our Congress, in the U.S. Supreme Court, and all federal agencies. Number 3, create minority group strife throughout the nation, particularly between whites and blacks. Number 4, create a movement to destroy religion in the United States, but Christianity to be the chief target. Earlier, I stated that Jacob Schiff came to America with orders by Rothschild to carry out 4 specific directives. The first and most important one was to get control of the United States money system.
So here we go right here. We're going to watch the process and apply it to what's going on today. They want us in Africa.
Let's trace Schiff's step to accomplish that directive. As a first step, he had to buy into a banking house, but it had to be the kind of a house that he could absolutely control and mold for that primary objective of entrapping our U.S. money system. After carefully scouting around, Jacob bought a partnership in a firm that called itself Kuhn and Loeb. Like Schiff, Kuhn and Loeb were immigrants from German Jewish ghettos. They came to the United States in the mid-1840s. Both started their business careers as itinerant pack peddlers. In the early 1850s, they pooled their interests and set up a merchandising store in Lafayette, Indiana, under the firm name of Kuhn and Loeb, servicing the covered wagon settlers on their way west. In the years that followed, they set up similar stores in Cincinnati and St. Louis. Then they added pawnbroking to their merchandising pursuits. From that to money lending was a short and quick step. By the time Schiff arrived on the scene, Kuhn and Loeb was a well-known private banking firm, and this is the firm Jacob bought into. Shortly after he became a partner in Kuhn and Loeb, Schiff married Loeb's daughter, Teresa. Then he bought out Kuhn's interests and moved the firm to New York, and Kuhn and Loeb became Kuhn, Loeb and Company, international bankers, with Jacob Schiff, agent of the Rothschilds, ostensibly the sole owner. And throughout his career, this blend of Judas and Machiavelli, the first hierarch of the Illuminati, great conspiracy in America, posed as a generous philanthropist and a man of great holiness, the cover-up policy set forth by the Illuminati. As I have stated, the first great step of the conspiracy was to be the entrapment of our money system. To achieve that objective, Schiff had to get full cooperation of the then big banker elements in America, and that was easier said than done. Even in those years, Wall Street was the heart of the American money mart, and J.P. Morgan was its dictator. Next in line were the Drexels and the Biddles in Philadelphia. All the other financiers, big and little, danced to the music of those three houses, but particularly to that of Morgan. All of those three were proud, haughty, arrogant potentates. For the first few years, they viewed the little bewhiskered man from the German ghettos with utter contempt. But Jacob knew how to overcome that. He threw a few Rothschild bones to them, said bones being distribution in America of desirable European stock and bond issues. Then he discovered he had a still more potent weapon in his hands in the following. It was in the decades following our Civil War that our industries began to burgeon. We had great railroads to build. The oil, mining, steel, textile industries were bursting out of their swaddling clothes. All that called for vast financing. Much of that financing had to come from abroad. That meant the House of Rothschild. And that was when Schiff came into his own. He played a very crafty game. He became the patron saint of John D. Rockefeller, Edward R. Harriman, and Andrew Carnegie. He financed the Standard Oil Company for Rocky, the railroad empire for Harriman, and the steel empire for Carnegie. But instead of hogging all the other industries for Kuhn, Loeb and Company, he opened the doors of the House of Rothschild to Morgan, Biddle, and Drexel. In turn, Rothschild arranged the setting up of London, Paris, European, and other branches for those three, but always in partnerships with Rothschild subordinates. And Rothschild made it very clear to all those men that Schiff was to be the boss in New York. Thus, at the turn of the century, Schiff had a tight control of the entire banking fraternity on Wall Street, which by then, with Schiff's help, included Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, and other internationalist banks, headed by men chosen by the Rothschilds.
It's nothing new under the sun. This is the same thing. The same names you're hearing right here was the same names back in 2008. So ain't nothing new under the sun.
In short, that meant control of the nation's money powers, and he was then ready for the giant step, the entrapment of our national money system.
Here we go.
Now, under our Constitution, all control of our money system is vested solely in our Congress. Schiff's next important step was to seduce our Congress to betray that constitutional edict by surrendering that control to the hierarchy of the Illuminati's great conspiracy. In order to legalize that surrender and thus make the people powerless to resist it, it would be necessary to have Congress enact special legislation. To accomplish that, Schiff would have to infiltrate stooges into both houses of Congress, stooges powerful enough to railroad Congress into passing such legislation. Equally, or even more important, he would have to plant a stooge in the White House, a president without integrity and without scruples, who would sign that legislation into law. To accomplish that, he had to get control of either the Republican or the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was the more vulnerable. It was the hungrier of the two parties. Except for Grover Cleveland, the Democrats had been unable to land one of their men in the White House since before the Civil War. There were two reasons for that. Number one, poverty of the party. Number two, there were considerably more Republican-minded voters than Democrats. The poverty matter was not a great problem, but the voter problem was a different story. But as I previously said, Schiff was a smart cookie. Here is the atrocious and murderous method he employed to solve that voter problem. His solution emphasizes how very little the Jewish internationalist bankers care about their own racial brethren, as you shall see. Suddenly, around 1890, there broke out a nationwide series of pogroms in Russia. Many, many thousands of innocent Jews, men, women, and children, were slaughtered by the Cossacks and other peasants.
So, see what he doing? He causing havoc. He went over there where all these, where these Jews at, in mass numbers, started causing chaos. He don't want them there, but they at the time, he don't need them there no more. He want them in America because he want to turn them into voters. So what you got to understand about that is, like I was saying earlier, about who conditioned your mind and why you think the way you think. So at the same time this going on, black folks getting sitting in restaurants and all that trying to vote. They said they think the vote means something. But look what this dude doing. So go back to the impact that they didn't put on 2, 3, 4, 5 generations of black folks about the vote, how important the vote is. Even go back further than that, go back to what they implanted in your head about Jesus the Christ. He ain't nothing. But look at the mindset that that implanted in the black folks as a race of people. But look what he's doing behind the scenes. Okay.
Similar pogroms with similar slaughter of innocent Jews broke out in Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria. All those pogroms were fomented by Rothschild agents. As a result, Jewish terrified refugees from all those nations swarmed into the United States.
They need voters.
And that continued throughout the next 2 or 3 decades because the pogroms were continuous through all those years.
Right. So the killings, the blacks constantly getting killed in the streets, they're going to continue till when? Till their objective is accomplished. They want the Negroes out of here on the west coast of Africa. These monies, these bankers, it's about money. And they're looking at the United States of Africa. They through with this place.
All those refugees were aided by self-styled humanitarian committees set up by Schiff, the Rothschilds, and all the Rothschild affiliates. In the main, the refugees streamed into New York. But the Schiff Rothschild humanitarian committees found ways to shuffle many of them into other large cities, such as Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, Detroit, Los Angeles, etc. All of them were quickly transformed into naturalized citizens and educated to register as Democrats. Thus, all of that so-called minority group became...
So you worried about passport. See that right here? When the time comes, passport ain't gonna be no problem. They above all that. It's about what they trying to accomplish.
solid Democratic voter blocs in their communities, all controlled and maneuvered by their so-called benefactors. And shortly after the turn of the century, they became vital factors in the political life of our nation. That was one of the methods Schiff employed to plant men like Nelson Aldrich in our Senate and Woodrow Wilson in the White House. At this point,
okay, so we see how that works. Like I said, we witnessing right now as we speak. You know, people getting bent out of shape and about this and that when, you know, it's futile because you see how these people operate. And so while we're dealing with homosexuality all over the place right now, he just told you that there's gonna be an uptick with the Negroes and the homosexuals, and it's gonna bring the homosexuals into make them politicians. Now you see where we at. They behind the scenes orchestrating all this and impose another ideology on you that you believe in because you ain't did no research and you ain't did no serious digging. You just whatever come forward, you taking it in, and you got strong emotions about something that somebody imposed on you. You haven't did no research. Okay, so we're gonna pick up in part 2. I had to go back and deal with that because I had left it out. So this is part 2.
To achieve their one world government. The first of those steps was to be World War I. Why war? Simple. The only excuse for a one world government is that it will supposedly ensure peace.
Anybody got any comments on what I just talked about before we start this? Sorry about that. Everybody good? Okay, everybody good?
Yeah. There's no comments in the chat.
Okay, I'm gonna continue on with this.
Peace. The only thing that can make people cry for peace is war. War brings chaos, destruction, exhaustion, to winner as well as to loser. It brings economic ruin to both. Most important, it destroys the flower of the young manhood of both. To the saddened and heartbroken oldsters, the mothers and fathers, who are left with nothing but memories of their beloved sons, peace becomes worth any price. And that is the emotion upon which the conspirators depend for the success of their satanic plot. Throughout the 19th century, from 1814 to 1914, the world as a whole was at peace. Such wars as the Franco-Prussian, our own Civil War, the Russo-Japanese War, were what might be termed local disturbances that did not affect the rest of the world. All the great nations were prosperous, the people staunchly nationalistic and fiercely proud of their sovereignties. It was utterly unthinkable that the French and the German peoples would be willing to live under a one-world government, or the Turks and the Russians, or the Chinese and the Japanese. Even more unthinkable that a Kaiser Wilhelm, or a Franz Joseph, or a Tsar Nicholas, or any monarch would willingly and meekly surrender his throne to a one-world government. But bear in mind that the peoples in all nations are the real power, and only one thing, war, could make the peoples yearn and clamor for a peace-ensuring one-world government. But it would have to be a frightful and horribly devastating war. It could not be just a local disturbing war between just two nations. It would have to be a world war. No major nation must be left untouched by the horrors and devastation of such a war. The cry for peace must be made universal. Actually, that was the format set by the Illuminati and Nathan Rothschild at the turn of the 19th century. They first maneuvered all of Europe into the Napoleonic Wars. Then the Congress in Vienna, which they, and particularly Rothschild, planned to transform into a League of Nations, which was to have been the housing for their one-world government, exactly as the present United Nations was set up to be the housing for the forthcoming, God forbid, one-world government. Anyway, that was the format the House of Rothschild and Jacob Schiff decided to employ to achieve their objective in 1914. Of course, they knew that that same format had failed in 1814, but they theorized that was only because the Tsar of Russia had torpedoed that scheme. Well, the present 1914 conspirators would eliminate that 1814 fly in the ointment. They'd make sure that after the New World War, they were conspiring there'd be no Tsar of Russia around to throw monkey wrenches into the machinery. I won't go into how they accomplished this first step to launch a world war. History records that World War I was precipitated by a trivial incident, the kind of incident both Weishaupt and Albert Pike had incorporated in their blueprints. That incident was the assassination of an Austrian archduke, arranged by the Illuminati masterminds. The war followed. It involved Germany, Austria-Hungary, and their allies, so-called the Axis powers, against France, Britain, and Russia, called the Allies. Only the United States was not involved during the first 2 years. By 1917, the conspirators had achieved their primary objective. All of Europe was in a state of destitution. All the peoples were war-weary and crying for peace. And the outcome, too, was all set. It was to come as soon as the United States would be hurled in on the side of the Allies. And that was all set to happen immediately after Wilson's re-election. After that, there could be only one outcome: complete victory for the Allies. To fully confirm my statement that long before 1917, the conspiracy headed in America by Jacob Schiff had it all set to hurl the United States into that war, I will cite the proof. When Wilson was campaigning for re-election in 1916, his chief appeal was, re-elect the man who will keep your sons out of the war. But during that same campaign, the Republican Party publicly charged that Wilson had long committed himself to throw us into the war. They charged that if he would be defeated, he would accomplish that act during his few remaining months in office. But if re-elected, he would hold off until after re-election. But at that time, the American people looked upon Wilson as a god-man. Well, Wilson was re-elected, and as per the schedule of the conspirators, he hurled us into the war in 1917. He used the sinking of the Lusitania as an excuse, a sinking which also was prearranged. Roosevelt, also a god-man in the eyes of the American people, followed the same technique in 1941 when he used the prearranged Pearl Harbor attack as his excuse for hurling us into World War II. Now, exactly as the conspirators planned, victory for the Allies would eliminate all the monarchs of the defeated nations and leave all their peoples leaderless, confused, bewildered, and perfectly conditioned for the one world government the great conspiracy intended would follow. But there still would be an obstacle, the same obstacle that had balked the Illuminati and Rothschild at that Congress in Vienna peace gathering after the Napoleonic Wars. Russia would be on the winning side this time, as it was in 1814. Therefore, the Tsar would be securely on his throne. Here it is pertinent to note that Russia, under the Tsarist regime, had been the one country in which the Illuminati had never made any headway, nor had the Rothschilds ever been able to infiltrate their banking interests. Thus, a winning Tsar would be more difficult than ever to cope with. Even if he could be enticed into a so-called League of Nations, it was a foregone conclusion that he would never, but never go for a one-world government. So even before the outbreak of World War I, the conspirators had a plan in the making to carry out Nathan Rothschild's vow of 1814 to destroy the Tsar and also murder all possible royal heirs to the throne. And it would have to be done before the close of the war, and the Russian Bolsheviki were to be their instruments in this particular plot. From the turn of the century, the chiefs of the Bolsheviki were Nikolai Lenin, Leon Trotsky, and later Joseph Stalin. Of course, those were not their true family names. Prior to the outbreak of the war, Lenin headquartered in Paris. After the outbreak, Switzerland became his haven. Trotsky's headquarters were on the Lower East Side in New York, largely the habitat of Russian Jewish refugees. Both Lenin and Trotsky were similarly bewhiskered and unkempt. In those days, that was the badge of Bolshevism. Both lived well, yet neither had a regular occupation. Neither had any visible means of support, yet both always had plenty of money. All those mysteries were solved.
Yeah, so you notice how they setting these people up. We got them in the background and building them up. You know, all of a sudden when the time comes, they bring them out in the open. We saw that with Obama. We see it happening now with Kamala Harris. It's nothing new under the sun. These people, they had them in the background grooming them the whole time.
In 1917. Right from the outset of the war, strange and mysterious goings-on were taking place in New York. Night after night, Trotsky darted furtively in and out of Jacob Schiff's palatial mansion. And in the dead of those same nights, there were gatherings of hoodlums of New York's Lower East Side, all of them Russian refugees, at Trotsky's headquarters. And all were going through some mysterious sort of training process. But it was all shrouded in mystery. Nobody talked, although it did leak out that Schiff was financing all of Trotsky's activities. Then suddenly Trotsky vanished. So did approximately 300 of his trained hoodlums. Actually, they were on the high seas in a Schiff-chartered ship, bound for a rendezvous with Lenin and his gang in Switzerland. And on that ship was $20 million in gold. The $20 million Schiff provided to finance the Bolsheviki takeover of Russia. In anticipation of Trotsky's arrival, Lenin prepared to throw a party in his Switzerland hideaway. Men of the very highest places in the world were to be guests at that party. Among them were the mysterious Colonel Edward Mandel House, Woodrow Wilson's mentor and palsy-walsy, and more important, Schiff's special and confidential messenger. Another of the expected guests was Warburg of the Warburg banking clan in Germany, who were financing the Kaiser, and whom the Kaiser had rewarded by making him chief of the secret police of Germany. In addition, there were the Rothschilds of London and Paris, also Litvinov, Kaganovich, Stalin, who was then head of a train and bank-robbing gang of bandits. He was known as the Jesse James of the Urals.
It's the same Joseph Stalin that later sent over to Russia. And all the killing that was going on over in Russia in World War II. It's the same dude. And the guy House is vice president of Woodrow Wilson. So, like I said, you got to go back and think about this voting process they got you under. And the whole time, all this going on, and they sitting around waiting on to see who Wilson's gonna pick as his vice president. And the whole time, they already know who it was, just like now. They already know. So, like I said before, you been out of shape behind certain ideologies that you done concocted in your head that you don't even know where they come from.
And here I must remind that England and France were then long in war with Germany, and that on February 3, 1917, Wilson had broken off all diplomatic relations with Germany. Therefore, Warburg, Colonel House, the Rothschild, and all those others were enemies. But of course, Switzerland was neutral ground where enemies could meet and be friends, especially if they had some scheme in common. That Lenin party was very nearly wrecked by an unforeseen incident. The chartered ship on its way to Switzerland was intercepted and taken into custody by a British warship. But Schiff quickly rushed orders to Wilson to order the British to release the ship intact with the Trotsky hoodlums and the gold. Wilson obeyed. He warned the British that if they refused to release the ship, the United States would not enter the war in April, as he had faithfully promised a year earlier. The British heeded the warning. Trotsky arrived in Switzerland, and the Lenin party went off as scheduled. But they still faced what ordinarily would have been the insurmountable obstacle of getting the Lenin-Trotsky band of terrorists across the border into Russia. Well, that's where Brother Warburg, chief of the German secret police, came in. He loaded all those thugs into sealed freight cars and made all the necessary arrangement for their secret entry into Russia. The rest is history. The revolution in Russia took place, and all members of the royal Romanov family were murdered. For the Illuminati one world government. I wish to stress one other very vital point. That Wilson League of Nations plot brought Schiff and his gang to the realization that control of just the Democratic Party was not enough. True, they could create a crisis during the Republican administration, as they did in 1929 with their Federal Reserve manufactured crash and depression, which would bring another Democrat stooge back into the White House. But they realized that a 4-year disruption in their control of our foreign relation policies could play havoc with the progress of their conspiracy. It could even break up their entire strategy, as it almost did before Roosevelt saved it with his recognition of the Stalin regime. Thereupon, after that Wilson debacle, they began to formulate plans to achieve control of both of our national parties. But that posed a problem for them. Manpower. Stooges in the Republican Party also added manpower for the Democratic Party, because control of just the man in the White House would not be enough. They'd have to provide that man with trained stooges for his entire cabinet, men to head the State Department, the Treasury Department, the Pentagon, the CIA, the USIA, etc. In short, every member of the various cabinets would have to be a chosen tool of the CFR, such as Rusk.
So watch what they go and get. It's a problem. They need some particular certain type of men to pull all this off.
And McNamara, also all undersecretaries and assistant secretaries. That would give the conspirators absolute control of all our policies, both domestic and, most important, foreign. That course of action would require a reserve pool of trained stooges, instantaneously ready for administrative changes and for all other exigencies. All such stooges would of necessity have to be men of national reputation, high in the esteem of the people, but they would have to be men without honor, without scruple, without conscience, men who would be vulnerable to blackmail. It is needless for me to stress how well the CFR succeeded. The immortal Joe McCarthy fully revealed that there are thousands of such security risks in all federal agencies. Scott McCloud unmasked thousands more, and you know the price Otepka has had to pay and is still paying for his expositions before a Senate committee of the traitors in the State Department. And you know that the men in the State Department who delivered Cuba to Castro have not only been shielded, but promoted. To the crux of the whole one world government plot and the maneuvering necessary to create another League of Nations to house such a government. As I have already stated, the conspirators knew that only another world war was vital for the success of their plot. It would have to be such a horrifying world war that the peoples of the world would cry out for the creation of some kind of a world organization that could assure everlasting peace. But how could such a war be brought about? All the European nations were at peace. None had any quarrels with their neighboring nations. And certainly their tools in Moscow wouldn't dare to start a war. Even Stalin realized that it would mean the overthrow of his regime unless so-called patriotism would will the Russian people behind him. But the conspirators had to have a war. They had to find or create some kind of an incident to launch it. And they found it in a little inconspicuous and repulsive little man who called himself Adolf Hitler. Hitler, an impecunious Austrian house painter, had been a corporal in the German army. He made the defeat of Germany into a personal grievance. He began to rabble-rouse about it in the Munich, Germany area. He began to spout about restoring the greatness of the German Empire and the might of the German soldiery. He advocated the restoration of the old German military to be used to conquer the whole world. Strangely enough, Hitler, the little clown that he was, could deliver a rabble-rousing speech, and he did have a certain kind of magnetism. But the new authorities in Germany didn't want any more wars, and they promptly threw the obnoxious Austrian house painter into a prison cell. Aha! Here was the man, decided the conspirators, who, properly directed and financed, could be the key to another world war. So while he was in prison, they had Rudolf Hess and Goering write a book which they titled Mein Kampf and attributed the authorship to Hitler, exactly as Litvinov wrote Mission to Moscow and attributed the authorship to Joseph Davies, then our ambassador to Russia and a stooge of the CFR. In Mein Kampf, Hitler, the pseudo-author, outlined his grievances and how he would restore the German people to their former greatness. The conspirators then arranged for a wide circulation of the book among the German people in order to arouse a fanatical following for him. On his release from prison, also arranged by the conspirators, they began to groom him and finance him to travel to other parts of Germany to deliver his rabble-rousing speeches. Soon he gathered a growing following among other veterans of the war, and that soon spread to the masses, who began to see in him a savior for their beloved Germany. Then came his leadership of what he called his brown shirt army and the march on Berlin. That required a great deal of financing, but the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, and others of the conspirators provided all the money he needed. Gradually, Hitler became the idol of the German people, and then they overthrew the von Hindenburg government, and Hitler became the new Führer. But that still was no reason for a war. The rest of the world watched Hitler's rise, but saw no reason to interfere in what was distinctly a domestic condition within Germany. Certainly none of the other nations felt it was a reason for another war against Germany, and the German people were not yet incited into enough of a frenzy to commit any acts against any neighboring nation, not even against France, that would lead to a war. The conspirators realized they would have to create such a frenzy that would cause the German people to throw caution to the winds and at the same time horrify the whole world. And incidentally, Mein Kampf was actually a follow-up of Karl Marx's book, A World Without Jews. The conspirators suddenly remembered how the Schiff Rothschild gang had engineered the pogroms in Russia, which slaughtered many, many thousands of Jews and created a worldwide hatred for Russia. And they decided to use that same unconscionable trick.
See that? Same trick. And they're doing it right now again. They want us over in Africa. They're using the same trick.
To inflame the new Hitler-led German people into a murderous hatred of the Jews. Now it is true that the German people never had any particular affection for the Jews, but neither did they have an ingrained hatred for them. Such a hatred would have to be manufactured. So Hitler was used to create it. This idea more than appealed to Hitler. He saw in it the grisly gimmick to make him the God-man of the German people. Thus, craftily inspired and coached by his financial advisors, the Warburgs, Rothschilds, and all the Illuminati masterminds, he blamed the Jews for the hated Versailles Treaty and for the financial ruination.
So I'm not to stop right there because I want to inject something. So he said, God, man. So I'm showing you how that it's a group of people. And the Most High told us, the Lord also told us that it's a children of wickedness. And so they coming about, it's a think tank. And like I was saying before, when you go to, they behind the scenes. And so when you go to the Bible, to the New Testament that they concocted, the part that's written in red, it's the same group, the think tank. You just seen where Hitler was a penile, but they put him in jail. Then they brought these they scribes, literary geniuses like Bacon and Josephus, and they gave him a book they wrote, but they put his name on it. And then they started putting it out in the streets and controlling the people's mind. They're not thinking for themselves. They done wrote a literary work and gave it to them, and now they're imposing it on the people. So it's nothing new under the sun. So like I said before, and then they made Hitler a God man. Well, look what they're doing now. With Trump. He's a God man. Ain't no different than what they did with Hitler, and they doing with him. And what he doing? He calls that chaos. Same playbook. Right. They're making it so terrible, so horrible over here that we want, when it's over with, it's already there now that the black intellectuals and the movers and shakers of the blacks, they're ready to go. That's the objective the whole time. We saw how they wanted the blacks and the blacks to start intermingling with the whites. And that happened. And I'm gonna give you a prime example of that. You probably slid over a lot of people's head, but go back to, it may not register, but go back to The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston. You thinking that's something that's something futile, but they played that song over and over again, and the plot of the movie was that the black woman head over heels behind a white man. And then they got the best singer in the world to sing the song. And from there, look what we're looking at now on TV. Everywhere you turn. These people manipulating your mind. You think you're making decisions on your own when they manipulating your mind.
That followed the war. The rest is history. We know all about the Hitler concentration camps and the incineration of hundreds of thousands of Jews. Not the 6 million, nor even the 600,000 claimed by the conspirators, but it was enough. And here let me reiterate how little the internationalist bankers, the Rothschilds, Schiffs, Lehmans, Warburgs, Baruchs, care about their racial brethren who were the victims of their nefarious schemes. In their eyes, the slaughter of the several 100,000 innocent Jews by Hitler didn't bother them at all. They considered it a necessary sacrifice to further their Illuminati one world plot, just as the slaughter of the many millions in the wars that followed was a similar necessary sacrifice.
Blacks getting shot down in the streets all over the place by the police is necessary for what they're trying to do. I understand that.
And here is another grisly detail about those concentration camps. Many of the Hitler soldier executioners in those camps had previously been sent to Russia to acquire their arts of torture and brutalization so as to emphasize the horrors of the atrocities. All this created a new worldwide hatred for the German people, but it still did not provide a cause for war. Thereupon, Hitler was incited to demand the Sudetenland. You remember how Chamberlain and the then diplomats of Czechoslovakia and France surrendered to that demand. That led to further Hitlerian demands for territories in Poland and in the French Saar territories. Those demands were rejected. Then came his pact with Stalin. Hitler had been screaming hatred against communism. Oh, how he ranted against communism. But actually, Nazism was nothing but socialism. And communism is, in fact, socialism. But Hitler disregarded all that. He entered into a pact with Stalin to attack and divide Poland between them. While Stalin marched into one part of Poland, for which he was never blamed, the Illuminati mastermind saw to that. Hitler launched a blitzkrieg on Poland from his side. The conspirators finally had their new world war. And what a horrible war it was. And in 1945, the conspirators finally achieved the United Nations, their new housing for their one world government. And truly amazing, all of the American people hailed this foul outfit as a holy of holies. Even after all the true facts about how the UN was created were revealed, the American people continued to worship that evil outfit. Even after Alger Hiss was unmasked as a Soviet spy and traitor, the American people continued to believe in the UN. Even after I had publicly revealed the secret agreement between Hiss and Molotov, that a Russian would always be the head of the military secretariat, and by that token, the real master of the UN, most of the American people continued to believe that the UN could do no wrong. Even after Trygve Lie, the first Secretary General of the UN, confirmed that Hiss-Molotov secret agreement in his book, For the Cause of Peace, the vast majority of our people refused to lose faith in the UN. Even after the truth about the Korean War was revealed, how the Russian General Vasilyev, head of that UN military secretariat, was given a leave of absence by the UN so that he could take command of the North Koreans and Red Chinese who were fighting the so-called UN police action under our own General MacArthur, who by orders of the UN was fired by the pusillanimous Truman in order to prevent his winning that war. Our people still believed in the UN, despite our 150,000 sons who were murdered and maimed in that war. The people continued to regard the UN as a sure means for peace, even after it was revealed in 1951 that the UN, using our own American soldiers under UN command and the UN flag, in collusion with our traitorous State Department and the Pentagon, had been invading many small cities in California and Texas in order to perfect their plan for the complete takeover of our country. Most of our people brushed it off and continued their belief that the UN is a holy of holies. Do you know that the UN Charter was written by traitor Alger Hiss, Molotov, and Beshinsky? That Hiss and Molotov had made that secret agreement that the military chief of the UN was always to be a Russian appointed by Moscow? Do you know that at their secret meetings at Yalta, Roosevelt and Stalin, at the behest of the Illuminati, operating as the CFR, decided that the UN must be placed on American soil? Do you know that most of the UN Charter was copied intact, word for word, from the Marx Manifesto and Russia's so-called Constitution? Do you know that the only two senators who voted against the UN so-called treaty were the only two senators who had read it? Do you know that since the UN was founded, communist enslavement has grown from 250 million to 1 billion? Do you know that since the UN was founded to ensure peace, there have been at least 20 major wars incited by the UN, just as they are now inciting a war against Little Rhodesia. Do you know that under the UN setup, the American taxpayers have been forced to make up the UN Treasury deficit of many millions of dollars because of Russia's refusal to pay her share? Do you know that the UN has never passed a resolution condemning Russia or her so-called satellites, but always condemns our allies? Do you know that J. Edgar Hoover said, "The overwhelming majority of the communist delegations to the UN are espionage agents"? And now, 66 senators voted for a consular treaty to open our entire country to Russian spies and saboteurs. Do you know that the UN helps Russia's conquest of the world by preventing the free world from taking any action whatsoever except to debate each new aggression in the UN General Assembly? Do you know that at the time of the Korean War, there were 60 nations in the UN, yet 95% of the UN forces were our American sons, and practically 100% of the cost was paid by the United States taxpayers? And surely you know that the UN policy during the Korean War was to prevent us from winning that war. Do you know that all the battle plans of General MacArthur had to go first to the UN to be relayed to Vasiliev, commander of the North Koreans and Red Chinese, and that any future wars fought by our sons under the UN flag would have to be fought under the control of the UN Security Council? Do you know that the UN has never done anything about the 80,000 Russian Mongolian troops that occupy Hungary? Where was the UN when the Hungarian freedom fighters were slaughtered by the Russians? Do you know that the UN and its peace army turned the Congo over to the communists? Do you know that the UN's own so-called peace force was used to crush, rape, and kill the white anti-communists in Katanga? Do you know that the UN stood by and did nothing while Red China invaded Laos and Vietnam? That it did nothing while Nehru invaded Goa and other Portuguese territories? Do you know that the UN was directly responsible for aiding Castro? That it does absolutely nothing about the many thousands of Cuban youngsters who are shipped to Russia for communist indoctrination? Do you know that Adlai Stevenson, of all people, said the free world must expect to lose more and more decisions in the UN? Do you know that the UN openly proclaims that its chief objective is one world government, which means one world laws, one world court, one world army, one world navy, one world air force, one world schools, and a one world church in which Christianity would be prohibited? Do you know that a UN law has been passed to disarm all American citizens and to transfer all our armed forces to the UN? Such a law was secretly signed by Saint Jack Kennedy in 1961. Do you realize how that fits in with Article 47, Paragraph 3 of the UN Charter, which states, I quote, "The Military Staff Committee of the UN shall be responsible through the Security Council for the strategic direction of all armed forces placed at the disposal of the Security Council," unquote. And when and if all our armed forces are transferred to the UN, your sons would be forced to serve and die under UN command all over the world. This will happen unless you fight to get the US out of the UN. Do you know that Congressman James Biot has submitted a bill to get the US out of the UN and a resolution to prevent our president from forcing us to support the UN embargoes on Rhodesia? Well, he has. And many people all over the country are writing to their representatives to support the up bill and resolution. And did you know that to offset the Up bill and resolution, 50 congressmen, spearheaded by Schweiker and Moorhead of Pennsylvania, have introduced a bill to immediately transfer all our armed forces to the UN. Can you imagine such brazen treason?
Right. So you see, with all that information coming forth right there, now you fast forward. That was in 1967. This guy talking about. It sounds like yesterday, but look what happened in 2016. Now you see why Russia did what they did in the United States election, because Russia in charge, which is nothing but Edomite Jews. That's all it is. So it's no coincidence. You know, you couldn't, without this right here, this information right here, it makes no sense of what happened in 2016 when Russia came in and bumped Hillary Clinton out the box. But with all this information right here, it's a given to see why it happened and why nothing ain't being done and why Trump doing what he doing.
Deadly, poisonous rattlesnake in our midst. My only wonder is what it will take to awaken and arouse our people to the full truth. Perhaps this record will do it. 100,000 or 1,000,000 copies of this record can do it. I pray to God it will, and I pray to Him to inspire you, all of you, to spread this story via this record to all loyal Americans in your community. You can do it by playing it to study groups assembled in your homes, at meetings of the American Legion, the VFW, the DAR, all other civic groups and women's clubs, especially the women's clubs who have their sons' lives at stake. With this record, I have provided you with the weapon that will destroy the monster. For the love of God, of our country, and of your children, use it. Get a copy of it into every American home. Bear in mind that they permitted Hitler, a liberal socialist himself, who was financed by Trump, Kennedy, the Warburgs, and the Rothschilds, to incinerate 600,000 Jews. Now, just why did the conspirators choose the word Illuminati for their satanic organization? Weishaupt himself said that the word is derived from Lucifer and means holders of the light, using the lie that his objective was to bring about a one-world government to enable those with mental ability to govern the world and prevent all wars in the future. In short, using the word peace on earth as his bait, exactly as that same bait, peace, was used by the 1945 conspirators to foist the United Nations on us. Weishaupt, financed, I repeat, by the Rothschilds, recruited some 2,000 paid followers. These included the most intelligent men in the fields of arts and letters, education, the sciences, finance, and industry. He then established lodges of the Grand Orient, Masonic lodges, to be their secret headquarters. And I again repeat that in all of this, he was acting under orders from the House of Rothschild. The main features of the Weishaupt plan of operation required his Illuminati to do the following things to help them to accomplish their purpose. Number one, use monetary and sex bribery to obtain control of men already in high places in the various levels of all governments and other fields of endeavor. Once influential persons had fallen for the lies, deceits, and temptations of the Illuminati, they were to be held in bondage by application of political and other forms of blackmail, threats of financial ruin, public exposure and physical harm, even death, to themselves and loved members of their families. Do you realize how many present top officials in our federal government in Washington are controlled in just that way by the CFR? Do you realize how many homosexuals in our State Department, the Pentagon, all federal agencies, even in the White House, are controlled that way? Number two, Illuminati on the faculties of colleges and universities were to cultivate students possessing exceptional mental ability, belonging to well-bred families with international leanings, and recommend them for special training in internationalism. Such training was to be provided by granting scholarships to those selected by the Illuminists. That gives you an idea what a Rhodes Scholarship means. It means indoctrination into accepting the idea that only a one-world government can put an end to recurring wars and strife. That's how the United Nations was sold to the American people. One of the most notable Rhodes Scholars we have in our country is Senator William J. Fulbright, sometimes referred to as Half-Bright. His entire voting record spells Illuminati. All such scholars were to be first persuaded and then convinced. The question of how and why the United Nations is the crux of the great conspiracy to destroy the sovereignty of the United States and the enslavement of the American people within a UN one-world dictatorship is a complete and unknown mystery to the vast majority of the American people. The reason for this unawareness of the frightening danger to our country and to the entire free world is simple. The masterminds behind this great conspiracy have absolute control of all of our mass communications media, especially television, the radio, the press, and Hollywood.
Right.
We all know that our state.
So we got to look at that, right? We got to look at that because it's not only do that apply. He asked the question, why do the average American don't know what they're doing with the UN and the undergoings of the UN? Well, it's the same thing with a lot of other things that we dealing with on this line. The New Testament, Jesus the Christ, a lot of other things. Why do people believe the way they believe? He just told you. They're controlling everything. It's been going on for time immemorial. Ever since these people came in charge, Most High said that Esau was going to break his brother's yoke off his neck. He did that when Most High brought the calamity on Israel back in 143 when he brought Antioch Epiphanes. And the Israelites ran out of the land. Esau took over. And he had our records. From that time on down to today, these people they manipulate behind the scenes, and then they intermingle with the wickedest people possible on the earth, which was Japhet. And they behind the scenes writing books, writing out ideologies and all kind of stuff behind the scenes and bringing it out and posting it on the world, posting it on people. And they continue to do it because nobody ain't stopped it yet. So we're going to let this other little bit play and then open up for questions.
The Pentagon and the White House have brazenly proclaimed that they have the right and the power to manage the news, to tell us not the truth, but what they want us to believe.
Right.
They have seized that power on orders from their masters of the great conspiracy. And the objective is to brainwash the people into accepting the phony peace bait to transform the United States into an enslaved unit of the United Nations one world government. First of all, bear in mind that the so-called UN police action in Korea, fought by the United States, in which 150,000 of our sons were murdered and maimed, was part of the plot. Just as the undeclared by Congress war in Vietnam, in which our sons are dying, is part of the plot. Just as the plot against Rhodesia and South Africa, in which our sons will be dying, is part of the UN plot. However, the vitally important thing for all Americans, all you mothers of the boys who died in Korea and are now dying in Vietnam, to know is that our so-called leaders in Washington, whom we elected to safeguard our nation and our Constitution, are the betrayers, and that behind them are a comparatively small group of men whose sole objective is to enslave the whole world of humanity in their satanic plot.
Yeah, let me read that right quick. I gotta put this in there right quick. It's a small group of people. I told you it's a think tank. They're the ones controlling the thoughts of everybody. If you ain't dealing with the Most High and seeking Him out, then they controlling. They controlling your thought line, your thought process, giving you ideologies and all this stuff. So let me read that right quick, so we can center this conversation where it need to be centered at. He says in Obadiah, right quick. He says, the vision of Obadiah, thus says the Lord concerning Edom. Like I said, it's a small group of people that's doing this, and they've been doing it. We have heard a rumor from the Lord, and the ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise, and let us go up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. Why they despised? Wicked ass stuff they doing. Small think tank with all the money. And we saw when Isaac blessed both of them, he told him, you're gonna rule, you're gonna be in the fat places of the earth, but you're gonna be there because of your got the sword and your wicked behavior. Okay.
Of one world government. Now, in order to give you a very clear picture of this satanic plot, I will go back to its beginning, clear back in the middle of the 18th century, and name the men who put that plot into action, and then bring you down to the present, today's status of that plot. Now, as a matter of further intelligence, a term used by the FBI, let me clarify the meaning of the expression, he is a liberal. The enemy, meaning the one world conspirators, have seized upon that word liberal as a cover-up for their activities. It sounds so innocent and so humanitarian to be liberal. We'll make sure that the person who calls himself a liberal or is described as a liberal is not in truth a red. Now then, this satanic plot was launched back in the 1760s when it first came into existence under the name of the Illuminati. This Illuminati was organized by one Adam Weishaupt, born a Jew, who was converted to Catholicism and became a Catholic priest, and then, at the behest of the then newly organized House of Rothschild, defected and organized the Illuminati. Naturally, the Rothschilds financed that operation. And every war since then, beginning with the French Revolution, has been promoted by the Illuminati, operating under various names and guises. I say,
notice that he's a priest. His origins, he's a priest, a scribe. Like I said, you're dealing with literary geniuses, and it's tied to just like the Most High Order, the Levites. The Levites control everything in the temple. These guys here, they stole the land of Israel in 143 BC. So you got two sets of Levites, two sets of priests, two priesthoods.
Under various names and guises, because after the Illuminati was exposed and became too notorious, Weishaupt and his co-conspirators began to operate under various other names. In the United States, immediately after World War I, they set up what they called the Council on Foreign Relations, commonly referred to as the CFR. And this CFR is actually the Illuminati in the United States. And its hierarchy the masterminds in control of the CFR, to a very great extent, are the descendants of the original Illuminati conspirators. But to conceal that fact, most of them changed their original family names to American-sounding names.
So watch this.
For example, the true name of the Dillons, Clarence and Douglas Dillon, once Secretary of the U.S. Treasury Department, is Lepowski. I'll come back to all this later.
Edomites.
There is a similar establishment of the Illuminati in England, operating under the name of the British Institute of International Affairs. There are similar secret Illuminati organizations in France, Germany, and other nations operating under different names. And all these organizations, including the CFR, continuously set up numerous subsidiary or front organizations that are infiltrated into every phase of the various nations' affairs. But at all times, the operations of these organizations were and are masterminded and controlled by the internationalist bankers, who in turn were and are controlled by the Rothschilds. The details of how they accomplished the setting up of the CFR in the United States, as also in the other nations, are far too voluminous to be described in this dissertation. But you can find it complete in News Bulletin number 122, entitled UN is Spawn of the Illuminati, and News Bulletin number 123, entitled CFR Completely Unmasked as Illuminati. Both are published by the Cinema Educational Guild, Post Office Box 46205, Hollywood, California. You can get them for 50 cents per copy by writing to that address. Those news bulletins reveal the names of the original founders of the Illuminati and the Americanized names of their descendants in the present CFR. Now I'll go back to the activities of the original Illuminati conspirators. As revealed in News Bulletin number 122, one branch of the Rothschild family had financed Napoleon. Another branch of the Rothschilds, both branches the real masterminds of the Illuminati, financed Britain, Germany, and the other nations in the Napoleonic Wars. Immediately after the Napoleonic Wars, the Illuminati assumed that all the nations were so destitute and so weary of wars that they'd be glad for any solution. So the Rothschild stooges set up what they called the Congress in Vienna. And at that meeting, they tried to create the first League of Nations, their first attempted one world government, on the theory that all the crowned heads of the European governments were so deeply in debt to them that they would willingly or unwillingly serve as their stooges. But the Tsar of Russia caught the stench of the plot and completely torpedoed it. The enraged Nathan Rothschild, then the head of that dynasty, vowed that someday he or his descendants would destroy the Tsar and his entire family. And his descendants did accomplish that very threat in 1917. At this point, bear in mind that the Illuminati was not set up to operate on a short-range basis. Normally, a conspirator of any type enters into a conspiracy with the expectation of achieving his objective during his own lifetime. But that was not the case with the Illuminati. True, they hoped to accomplish their objective during their lifetime. But, paraphrasing The Show Must Go On, the Illuminati operates on the very long-range basis. Whether it will take scores of years or even centuries, they have dedicated their descendants to keep the plot boiling until they hope the conspiracy is achieved. Now let's go back to the birth of the Illuminati. Adam Weishaupt was a Jesuit-trained professor of canon law, teaching in Ingolstadt University when he defected from Christianity to embrace the Luciferian conspiracy. It was in 1770 that the professional moneylenders, the then recently organized House of Rothschild, retained him to revise and modernize the age-old protocols of Zionism, which from the outset was designed to give the synagogue of Satan, so named by Jesus.
Yeah, we're going right back to protocols of Zion. We end up right back in Jerusalem. And we end up right back with these Jews, with these Edomites. Back in the midst of prophecy. It's just that they done flipped it all around where the average person can't, they've been disconnected from understanding that this is the Most High prophesied all this.
Christ, ultimate world domination, so they could impose the Luciferian ideology upon what would remain of the human race after the final social cataclysm by use of satanic despotism. Weishaupt completed his task May 1st, 1776. Now you know why May 1 is the great day with all communist nations to this very day. That was the day, May 1, 1776, that Weishaupt completed his plan and officially organized the Illuminati to put the plan into execution. That plan required the destruction of all existing governments and religions. That objective was to be reached by dividing the masses of people whom he, Weishaupt, termed Goyim, or human cattle, into opposing camps in ever-increasing numbers on political, social, economic, and other issues. The very conditions we have in our country today. The opposing sides were then to be armed and incidents provided which would cause them to fight and weaken themselves and gradually destroy national governments and religious institutions. Again, I say, the very conditions in the world today. And at this point, let me stress a prime feature of the Illuminati plans. When and if their blueprint for world control, the protocols of the elders of Zion, is discovered and exposed, they would wipe all the Jews off the face of the earth in order to divert suspicions from themselves. If you think this is far-fetched, that men of special talent and brains have the right to rule those less gifted on the ground that the masses don't know what is best for them physically, mentally, and spiritually. In addition to the Rhodes and similar scholarships, today there are 3 special Illuminati schools located in Gordonstown in Scotland, Salem in Germany, and Anavrita in Greece. These 3 are known ones, but there are others that are kept undercover. Prince Philip, the husband of Britain's Queen Elizabeth, was educated at Gordonstown at the instigation of Lord Louis Mountbatten, his uncle, a Rothschild relative who became Britain's admiral of the fleet after World War II ended. Number 3, all influential people trapped into coming under the control of the Illuminati, plus the students who had been specially educated and trained, were to be used as agents and placed behind the scenes of all governments as experts and specialists, so they would advise the top executives to adopt policies which would, in the long run, serve the secret plans of the Illuminati one world conspiracy and bring about the destruction of the governments and religions they were elected or appointed to serve. Do you know how many such men operate in our government at this very time? Rusk, McNamara, Hubert Humphrey, Fulbright, Kuchel, and go on and on and on. Number 4, perhaps the most vital directive in Weishaupt's plan was to obtain absolute control of the press, at that time the only mass communications media, to distribute information to the public. so that all news and information could be slanted, so that the masses could be convinced that a one-world government is the only solution to our many and varied problems. Now, do you know who owns and controls our mass communications media? I'll tell you, practically all the movie lots in Hollywood is owned by the Lehmans, Kuhn Loeb and Company, Goldman Sachs, and other internationalist bankers. All the national radio and TV channels in the nation are owned and controlled by those same internationalist bankers. The same is true of every chain of metropolitan newspapers and magazines, also of the press wire services, such as Associated Press, United Press International, etc. The supposed heads of all those media are merely the fronts for the internationalist bankers, who in turn compose the hierarchy of the CFR, today's Illuminati in America. Now can you understand why the Pentagon's press agent Sylvester so brazenly proclaimed that the government has the right to lie to the people? What he really meant was that our CFR-controlled government had the power to lie to and be believed by the brainwashed American people. And let's again go back to the first days of the Illuminati. Because Britain and France were the two greatest world powers in the late years of the 18th century, Weishaupt ordered the Illuminati.
Okay, that's it. Any question? We're gonna open it up for some questions.
Wow, that is a lot of information, but it is a lot of puzzle pieces too.
Right. It's almost when you're listening to him, it's almost like he's talking about today.
Exactly.
Exact same thing going on today. Right.
So I wanted to make 3 statements. Number one, if these people planned on purpose to kill 6 million Jews to further their agenda, that's the same. They think even worse about us, you know.
Right.
It's
exactly.
like they'll slaughter us, you know. So it's real, you know. Us being the target of the Edomites is real, and they methodically, I mean, down through centuries, you know, decades and centuries, make these plans, and they plan for lives to be lost. The 9/11, they plan to kill. That's just collateral damage. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right, exactly.
It's part of the plan. It's to be expected. So I wanted to say that. Then I wanted to say, I used to wonder, how in the world do you go from America to Germany to whatever other country I travel to? The black man is always on the bottom. I'm like, how did all these people get the memo?
Right.
We just found out how they got it.
Right, exactly.
They got these organizations set up all over the world. And like you say, it's from a small family that have, you know, I mean, they marry each other, they go into other countries and become a part of the culture. I mean, they look like Chinese, but they Illuminati. They look like Germans. They look like, but it's all like you always say. It's the genius of Esau.
Right, exactly. And then Most High tells you that all the minor prophets that's what they're talking about. When you understand who the minor prophets are, the minor prophets are, they all came out of Babylon with Zerubbabel.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make you think that they scattered all through the scriptures, but all of them, Obadiah, Zechariah, Haggai, Malachi, all of them came out of Babylon with Zerubbabel. And so they all prophesied about a certain situation and a certain time frame, and they all mentioning Esau and what he's going to be doing in these latter days. The guy he just laid it all out for you, not even knowing he's doing it, but he just laid it out for you.
Mm-hmm. Now he mentioned a man by the name of Mountbatten. Okay,
Yeah,
Mountbatten is the uncle of the queen's husband,
right, right.
and he
Mind
must
that,
exactly
right,
he must have made a misstep in what he was supposed to be doing because he was out fishing one day and somebody blew his boat up. That's so that's how he he expired. He was a part of that whole Rothschild Illuminati thing, and he actually brought the queen's husband, to how they have parties or they have little ceremonies or whatever. They
right.
specifically had bred uh, King Albert or whatever you call it, the queen's husband. They breed these people from little children. They not gonna, they get their mind right from when they're young.
Right,
So Mountbatten was raised up to infiltrate the royal family, and he brought the little guy brought him and introduced him to the current queen when she was young,
right,
and um and then of course I don't know what he did, but he was murdered. Like I say, he was out on a boat and the boat blew up, and it was a big deal to the royal family. They actually have a documentary on it, and so yeah, this little guy on this video that you allowing us to listen to, I mean, he's not leaving no stone unturned. He's giving us all the puzzle pieces. So
right,
I just really enjoy this because it's put together a lot of puzzle pieces for me.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. It's just like I said before. Everybody else, they got you with a certain mindset that they control how you thinking, whereas they thinking like I'm saying, the Most High when he dealing with us, he's dealing with DNA. He tells you that he's the DNA that he created. He don't want it intermingled and all that. Well, they're doing the same thing. That's what these control marriages all about.
Mm-hmm.
They dealing with literally what the Most High dealing with, but they got you doing something else. Like he just said, they set it up for by giving blacks money and giving them certain opportunities. They was gonna run to the white folks and start intermarrying with them, and that's exactly what.
Exactly.
So that's
Exactly.
how they working. They working off literally dealing with DNA. Where we ain't thinking like they thinking like that because that's why the Most High thinking. But they got us. We ain't thinking like that.
Right. Right.
Right.
And
So
Leonard, too, real quick, every little black girl that grew up in America and was educated through that system, they were made to feel inferior to the whites from a young age. Okay,
right,
like they was taught not to like their hair, and come to
right,
find out with our studies and everything, our hair is our antennas to our God. You
right.
know,
Exactly.
and then all the little black
Male and
boys,
female.
huh?
Male and female, and then that's all the way across the board.
Y-
That's why I keep on stressing the fact that you got to go back and think about some of the things that you got a zeal for and you zealous for. Who gave it to you?
Yeah.
Because what actually is none for it. You need to do something with it because it ain't going nowhere. It's something these wicked ass folks that impose on you.
Mm.
Do your research. Yeah.
Okay, one last thing, Leonard. All of the black boys want to be NFL players or basketball players, which is leading them to a dead end, and it's kind of like a pipe dream. And what happens is when they finish high school, if they was a star in high school and they don't make it to college, they go to the streets. You know what I'm saying? They start trying to
Right.
make quick money.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else got something? Okay.
Yeah, no comments in the chat.
So nobody else had nothing?
Uh-uh.
Okay. Like I was saying before, that was part two. Breaking down the fact that trying to connect uh, biblical history and the Tanakh with present day. according to the Illuminati and, you know, all these secret societies and everything. I was trying to connect the dots for, you know, for the people that's searching. And so, and we did a part 1 and 2. And with that being said, I'm gonna see everybody tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Shalom, shalom, and another shalom.